Oh, hi there. Welcome to Synergy Cafe. You caught me off guard there. I wasn't focused. Okay, I'm just teasing. That's just a segue into our guest that's coming up. His name is Gane, and there's going to be more about that. He's got a website called Gane Wisdom, and that's what that's about right here. That's one of his websites. He's got a couple of them. And today we're going to talk about achieving goals because there's a difference, in my opinion, between a goal and an objective. To me, an objective is like, okay, I'm going to California. A goal needs to be a little more specific that I'm going to California. In fact, it's going to be in Temecula, California, and I'm going to get there at 2 p.m. And now I know where I'm going to get, when I'm going to get there, and getting more specific on that goal. Kind of like in football, you need a goal. And when the time runs out, the one that has the most points, the team that has the most points, gets to be the winner. So a goal to me is different than an objective. But we're going to talk to the expert here. Hey, maybe he's an expert. I don't know. Let's go find him. Go. His name is Guy. He goes by Gino. Is he there? There he is.
I'm here.
I'm here. How you doing?
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm wonderful and half, and then some to the 10th power of infinity.
Good. Good.
So we had talked before, but this is sort of a secondary follow-up to some of the things. And you'd mentioned that you wanted to chat a little about goals. And that's one of the things that when people talk about, I've got goals, and they don't have them, the SMART goal thing, the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. If it's not tuned in like that, it might not be a goal. My goal is I want to go to Europe. Well, okay, you can go to Europe, and if you're in a bad part of Europe, that's going to have to be good enough because you set the goal, right?
Right.
Good idea.
It's a good way to put it, actually. Because I think a lot of us, we have like these general goals. I want to be rich. I want to have money. I want to have a nice home. I want to have a nice car. But sometimes what happens is that we get to a point where we don't know exactly what it is that we want. And, I equate that to going to a restaurant and asking the waiter for a steak. And he goes in the back and puts the order in. He said, well, you know what? I wanted meat for my entree, but I think I'd like a pork chop. So the waiter comes back out. He said, I'd like to change that order. Can I have a pork chop instead? The waiter runs in the back. He comes out. Yeah, no problem. The cook hasn't started yet. He comes back a minute later to take a refill or whatever. And you say, what? I was really thinking about a hamburger. Well, you keep doing that, and you're going to probably get thrown out of the restaurant. But that really is the way a lot of us are when we come into what we want as a goal. We kind of know what we want. In this case, we want to eat in that example, but we don't know exactly what it is. And I think it's very important to be clear about what it is that we want. And I really think that's a difficult thing to do. Yeah, it really is, because, again, we know a general thing, but we don't really know the exact thing that we want. And once we become clear, I think it's important that we all know that we have a choice, and our choices are up to us. If we want whatever it is that we want, that's there. I know when we spoke last, Brad, that, we had spoken about, God's will. And in my book, Chrysalis, I speak a lot about, going with God's will or going by what he allows. And it's one of the two things. There's no in between. God either allows things in our life, whether you're a believer or not, or you go by God's will. And take it from me, especially from my past experience, it's a whole lot easier going about God's will. And I think a lot of times when I speak with people and I speak to organizations, they ask me, well, how do I know that what I'm hearing is the right thing for me? And I think that it's important to have a relationship with God. And it's an important a part of our lives to have prayer involved in our life. And I know for a lot of people, they don't really pray, or maybe they go to church on Sunday, maybe they go to church on Easter and on Christmas, or maybe they never go. And I say to people, when people say, well, I really don't believe in God, or I'm not sure, or when we die, I think it's all over. And I don't want to digress from the goal setting part, but I do want to say that, there's no atheists in foxholes. And you have life sometimes throws the harshest bullets. And I think it's important to have something to hang on to. And so if we can agree with that premise that there is a God and he truly does love us, and he's there for us, I think it's important that in some way, shape, or form, we reach out to him. And when I mentioned a second ago about having the choice, God gives us free will. So we're free to choose whatever we want to do. I mean, whatever it is that we want. And I think this is where we get hung up because not only don't we know exactly what it is that we want, but sometimes I think we feel unworthy. You know, I remember when I first got into trouble, I kept visualizing that I was going to go to prison and what's going to happen to me and what's going to happen to my wife, my family, and the more I didn't want to go to prison, the more I thought about going to prison. And I kept saying, well, things are going to work out. The government's going to find out the truth. I'm going to be fine. And of course, we know what happened, afterwards. But
Well, some people actually don't. So let me
go ahead.
recap some of that stuff that, like to me, with the whole concept of goal things and being clear, it is like a laser focus that you're clear. And the analogy I use is like a magnifying glass with the sun focusing the rays onto the piece of wood. You can't move it around. You can't go from that hamburger to the fish to the pork chop to the steak because it'll never get hot enough to burn.
Right.
So you do have to laser focus. And our title here is like divine life purpose, the blessings of failure. So people don't know what their purpose is. What is my purpose? And if you don't believe in God, then there might be that little voice of yourself talking to yourself. And when you're in purpose, when you're in the zone, that's probably your purpose. And that would be, you and I would agree that it's God talking to you saying, okay, you're on the right track. And the blessings of failure part is your situation where thought you were doing everything right. And then someone said, threw you a curveball. And for those that don't know, this poor man went to prison for a while. But the blessings of failure, you might have had that failure, but you probably had a lot of time in there to talk to that, whatever that is. That God is talking to me.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. When people pray or they think about a God, I say a God. A lot of people that I talk to say, well, I'm spiritual. I'm not really religious. And I understand that. I do. I mean, you can call whatever you want. You can call him infinite intelligence. You can call him the supreme being. You can say whatever you want to call God. He doesn't care what name you call him as long as you have a relationship. I just think that it's really important that when somebody does fail, like I did, that you realize that there is a purpose to that. And this is not an excuse. And I think that's another thing, that when people fail, they think that they've done really something wrong. And, I'm done for the rest of my life. And, Brad, when I would talk to white collar guys, especially when I was inside, and as you know, I was in prison for 9 years. When I would speak to white collar guys, they thought their lives were over. There were doctors in prison, there were attorneys in prison, there were accountants, and any type of really any profession was in there. And the more successful that person was, the more it affected their psyche, that they were done, they were through. Now, I'm talking about guys that were in their 30s and 40s, leave alone 50s and 60s, like I was. And I think that when you give up, you failed. When you give up, you have failed, because you can have so many bumps in the road. But I am the analogy I like to use, and I talk about this in Chrysalis, is riding a bike. When we were 4 or 5 years old, however old we were when we first climbed down that bike, we didn't go in a straight line. And a 5 or 6 year old doesn't worry about aerodynamics and going forward and how you got to keep pedaling to go forward. We fall off of our bikes a lot. And that's how we learn to stay upright. And it's the same thing with life, because I think we get taught so many lessons early on that we become so inured with them that we forget them. They were so successful that we just don't do it again. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
On that kind of thing too. I mean, when people say, okay, you're a sinner, some people attach that to like it's a bad thing. You're a sinner. You're bad. But from what I've understood, that it's means kind of missing the mark. It's an archery term of missing the mark.
Right.
It's not that you're bad. It's that you didn't hit the target. So we're ready to relook at that and go, maybe I should adjust what I'm doing here.
Right. That's one of the things I think that's very difficult is getting called names. I mean, that old saying, sticks and stones. But the problem is when we accept that label, that we're a sinner, I'm bad, I don't deserve it, there's no way I'm going to get it. That's all part of goals. It's all part of achieving a goal. If you accept that in your mind, see, I think that it's much easier for people to be negative than it is to be positive, or to
Sure.
think that things are going to go upside down instead of going exactly the way I want them to. And I speak from experience with that. The last place I wanted to be on earth was in prison. And I prayed all the time, please, dear God, get me out of here. I'm a good boy. I promise I'll be good. All of those things. And, and the tears that came with it, especially at the beginning. But, the thing is that if we blame our circumstances and not take responsibility for the opportunity that's given with those blessings of failure, because if you learn from failure, if you surpass and overcome and realize, why did I fail? What went on here that caused me to get into this position? I know what it was for me. And it is that I didn't listen to that still small voice. And, I had been led. We all have that voice, whether you want to call it the Holy Spirit, which is what I call it, but whether you want to call it the Holy Spirit or that still small voice or our conscience or whatever, that voice will generally tell us the right thing to do if we're in tune to it. If we're in tune to knowing that into it, that I know that what I'm hearing is the right thing to do. And, what I would do, I think one of the premier, if not the most important thing that I wrote about in Chrysalis is how to know if you're doing the right thing. I think if we know that, I think we're going to do well. And let me explain how you know that. When you have an idea and you think, I'm going to go ahead and do this, if your soul or your still small voice is making you feel uncomfortable, that's the sign that God, if you will, is telling you not to do it, not to go ahead and do it. But if, on the other hand, that you think, well, I don't want to do this. I maybe this isn't the thing to do. And you've got that still small voice telling you to go ahead and do it. That's God talking to you to go ahead and do it. And I can attest that I heard those voices endlessly, constantly. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't hire this person. Don't hire that person, or hire this person or that. And the thing is that in most cases, I didn't listen. I heard them. I just didn't listen. And when I realized that I'm not too smart, I may have made a lot of money, and I did. I made nearly $500,000 a year for a lot of years as a stockbroker. But I wasn't too smart, because if I would have been smart, I would have listened to that. And of course, these pieces of advice, I wouldn't have had the knowledge to give or the experiences to impart them. But I really do think that if we listen to that voice and we get a good feeling about something, we should go ahead. This is not unique for me or for you. Every single human being has that voice inside of them. Sometimes you don't use it, and it kind of goes away, or maybe you're used to not hearing it and you don't pay attention to it. I don't think it goes away. I just don't think we pay attention to it. But I really do think that if you get a good feeling about something, you should go ahead and do it. It's the same thing with relationships. She might be the prettiest girl in the world, but if you're getting a bad feeling about this, you should go with that feeling.
What would you say in the situation where, okay, you're setting a goal and the goal is that I think I need to be going to Los Angeles, California in December.
Mm-hmm.
And then day goes by, and all of a sudden you get this other idea for a goal, and it's saying, I think I should be in Miami, Florida in December. There's that conflict there. How do you weigh that out and figure out, okay, which one of these is supposed to be divine and which one's a little trick?
Right. That takes practice to do. I'm not going to lie. That takes practice, and it takes prayer. And I know a lot of the folks that maybe are not prayer people, if you will, say, wow, that's crazy. I'm telling you, from my experience, that's not crazy. Because if you have, or let me put it this way, we all listen to the radio now and then. When you want to listen to a particular station, but let's say you're 100 miles out, you may not get that signal very clearly, or you may have to move around the dials, and you're kind of hearing, but you're not kind of hearing. What I attribute that to is the same as prayer. If you can, and prayer doesn't have to be, oh, please, dear God, or our Father, or something like that. It can just be a conversation. Hey, what should I do? Lord, what do you suggest? And tell me what I should do. And you get a sense of relief, if that's the word, a sense of peace. So, if you were thinking, well, I need to go to Los Angeles because I have a big meeting, but I really should go to Miami because, my cousin is there and, they've been asking me to come over there and there's some opportunities, maybe or maybe not. What should I do? I think if you have a good prayer life, and I know it sounds hokey, I know it does,
Yeah.
but it's the truth. If you have a good prayer life, you can decipher exactly what you're trying to hear.
Well, here's
and
another
which is the best
analogy
way.
for that kind of thing. Because when you mentioned the idea of listening to the radio station and you're 100 miles out from the station,
Mhm.
you have to tune that in. There might be a couple situations where you're at a party, there's a lot of good-looking girls, the music is cranking, the beer is flowing, having a really good time, you feel good inside,
Mhm.
and then you got to retune because you're not getting the right message. Maybe you should go to some place quiet, like a
Mhm.
church or a synagogue or a mosque or something, and
Right.
go out. Maybe you're going to get a different radio station then.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's important to have a quiet place that you can go to, whether it's your room or to church or just get in the car and, go take a ride in the country or go to the beach or whatever it is that gives you time alone. And I think that's one of the things that our society right now frowns on: naps. I mean, you shouldn't take a nap. I mean, you shouldn't be tired in the middle of the day. But when you've got that alone time, whether it's taking a nap and rejuvenating, or you just need to check out for 5 or 10 minutes. I think that's really important and kind of center yourself, but you can't try to do it. You just can't try. You just have to do it. And I think for me, and again, I don't know this for everybody else, but I think for me, or I know for me, when I try to take that quiet time, it's not so much that I'm dwelling constantly on the situation or the problem that I'm trying to address. What I'm doing is just giving myself a sense of peace. Yeah, that's not going to go away. And of course, if it's an important question, um, you know, uh, should I buy this car? Should I spend this $35,000? Those kind of things are more important. Of course, there's a lot more important things to think about other than buying a car. But my point is that you need to take some time to yourself, and be careful asking opinions of other people, because everybody has an opinion. You know how that old saying goes.
Yeah.
The problem is they don't know exactly what you do. They don't have the life that you do. And even though it might be a family member that you might ask, did you ever notice that when you ask somebody's opinion and you don't take it, they get mad? Silence is golden.
Yeah,
And
why
and,
ask
and,
me?
and yeah, yeah, you didn't. You asked me my opinion, you didn't take it, and now it didn't work out. Well, that's a lesson that we learned. But the thing is that keep your private business private. That's something else that I talk about in Chrysalis. A lot of us like to talk about, oh, I've got this going and I've got that going, and this is going to happen, and none of it happens. I had a boss when I first started in the business. My manager said, "Well done is better than well said." And I kind of didn't know what that meant or understand completely what he meant, but it's very, very true. Let your actions speak for you. When you get to the point where you say, well, I have a guy that I know who was looking at having a TV show. And he told me, well, I'm going to be doing this and I'm going to be doing that. And I'm going to be on TV in the next few months. And I said to him, I said, if it hasn't happened yet, kind of be careful who you say this to. But, he was feeling kind of low. So he was out there telling everybody, and, he wanted to hear everybody oohing and on, and that's awesome and stuff. It didn't work out for him, unfortunately. But this particular individual, and I'm not putting anybody down, I'm just using him as an example. This particular individual had a habit of doing that, talking about all of the things that he had going, and they weren't only going, they were happening. And I'm all for belief. I'm all for, seeing the end result. But sometimes we just got to keep our own counsel. Sometimes we've got to keep our big mouth shut. And I kept telling him, just don't tell anybody, because, people don't always wish everybody else well. And I want to just, if I could stay on that subject for 1 minute. When I was in prison, guys would come in and talking about their appeals. Everybody in prison, it seemed, appealed their case. They tried to get out, and they had their attorneys did a bad job, and whatever the case was. But these guys would come in and into the law library, especially, and shoot off about how they were doing their appeal, and that that they're going to be successful, and their lawyers are jailhouse lawyers, whatever, told them what a good appeal that they had going. And I would say to these guys, maybe you should just kind of keep that to yourself until something good happens. Oh, you're right, Gino, you're right. I have to do that. And they go right back to doing it the next day. But the reason I said that to them, when those guys would walk out of the room, and I was there, I would see it. Everybody who was congratulating them, and that's really great, and I'm sure everything is going to work out for you. As soon as that guy left the room, I won't get into the verbiage that they would say, but you can use your imagination. Nobody was happy for them. I mean, or at least very few were, because, they're jealous. And when people get jealous, if you have more than they do, or they think that you're better looking than them, or you have, whatever the case is, if they think that you have more than them, or you're going to get ahead of them, most people, not everybody, but most people don't wish everybody goodwill. And I think it's really important to keep our private business private. Again, that's part of goal setting, because keep your goals to yourself. You don't have to explain it, and you don't have to defend it. And maybe when we have more time, maybe in another show, I can talk about, really what to do to overcome that doubt, and the steps to take to overcome that doubt. Because I think it's really important that you know that. But I will touch on that for a second. If you have a goal and it's something that you really want, that you want a new home, your home that you're in right now, for whatever reason, it just doesn't suit you and your family any longer. Have something else. You might have picked a home out of Zillow or, Redfin or wherever, or just happen to go down the street and seen a home that you really like. But the thing is that if you start counting on doing that, what happens there? When you start counting on something, our brains are immediately wired to think, well, what if it doesn't happen? And why is it, Brad, that what we want usually happens? Or excuse me, what we don't want, usually happens. But what we don't want, the problem is that we think about all of the reasons that we're not going to get it because we worry. And I think the impediment to reaching a goal is worry. Because when you worry, you think about the negative outcome, all of the reasons that it's not going to happen. What if it doesn't happen? And we begin to picture. I remember when everything happened with me, with the government. A couple of months had gone by, and I kept asking my attorney that I had at the time, have you heard anything? What's going on? He said, no, there's no criminal case out there. So I kind of felt good about that, but I kept thinking and picturing and what if? And I remember I used to I lived in Niagara Falls back then, and I had a place on the river. I was out on the dock. It was over Labor Day weekend. I remember this beautiful weekend that year. And I remember sitting out at the dock thinking, well, they don't really have a case, and I guess everything is going to be okay. And gee, I hope it is. But what if something happens and I go to prison? And oh my God, I don't know if I could handle it. And all of those mental pictures, Brad, started coming up, and I started picturing them so vividly, and I could actually see myself walking into prison and what life was going to be like. And I didn't want that to happen. And here I am.
It's sort of impossible not to think stuff like that. And once you think it, you can't erase it. It's like if you think about a pink elephant up in the corner, all of a sudden you can't stop but see that visualization.
That's exactly right. And that's, I think, again, that works for one way as well as the other.
Exactly.
If you continue to dwell on, I used that example of a house a minute ago. If you continue to dwell on the perfect home for you, and kind of know what it looks like. It may not be exactly the one that you were looking at, but kind of that way, when you think about that and you continue to picture that in your mind, eventually you will reach that.
Well, I'm definitely a believer in that. It's kind of like just having the faith that it will come through. If
Exactly.
you keep on chanting it and visualizing it and praying about it and focusing on it, and then it'll happen in the weirdest way. It'll just manifest because that's what happens when you stay focused.
One of the things that I like to use an example, I should say, that I like to use is, especially for the ladies, when we're driving down the street and let's say 7:30 in the morning, I always noticed that there's some girls in the car and they're putting the makeup on, they're putting their eyeliner and so on. I think that's what it's called. But anyway, they're putting their makeup on in the car. But what were we doing at that point? They're saying, I need a red light. I hope I get to I need a red light to be able to do this. But what happens when we want that red light? It's green after green after green. It's just amazing that when you really want that red light, it doesn't happen. I don't know why it works that way, but that does. It seems that way. But I think, like I said, that, if we have a clear picture of kind of what it is that we want, and then we zero in on exactly what we want, we'll reach that goal. You will reach it, because if you continue to play that over and over and over in your mind and try to take the doubt out, try to take the worry out. And when you do that, it's going to be easier for you not to think about the negative, not to think that it's not going to come through. And it's so very, very important, because, again, in order to get rid of worry and anxiety, there's two ways to do that. Number one is that you tell yourself, I want to have a plan B. So I'm not going to get this house, but I might be able to get this house. Or, I need to do something to stop worrying. And the way to stop worrying about something is to take action. If you take action on something, you say, well, I'm not going to just sit here and pray. The Bible, there's a passage in the Bible, it's in James, that, that talks about prayer. It says, a faith without works is dead. Meaning, you can have all the faith in the world that things are going to happen. And that's good. You need that. You need to have your mind prepared. But if you don't do anything to achieve that, the birds don't do that. They just don't sit there. And, the Bible also Jesus talks about the lilies in the field having their food, and the birds in the air and so on. But they all have to do their part. You just don't sit there and say, well, I'm a bird and I'm sitting in my nest and somehow I'm going to get worms dropped into my nest. I don't have to do anything. We have to take action. But the thing is that never doubt, because when you doubt, and which is a very normal thing to do, it needs a lot of training to get over that. And we have ways that I talk about that in the book, that to get rid of doubt and how to go about doing that. But if you get rid of doubt, or at least as much doubt as you possibly can, you will achieve your goals, because we have a choice.
You have a copy of the book that you could hold up?
I don't have one in front of me. I'm sorry, I don't. I
will put a link in it. I'll find it on Amazon or whatever. I'll put it in the blog post.
Yeah. I should have had it with me.
We've gone through about 26 minutes. I try and keep these a little bit tight, but I totally get that concept of you set that goal and you got to hold that vision. Because if you're like, okay, this is my goal, I'm getting to Los Angeles, and you got to hold the vision for it. You can't all of a sudden go, I'm going to take a trip over to Ohio.
Right.
Now you're not going to get to Los Angeles because you're not going that direction anymore. So you got to hold that vision. I think that's really important and hard to do because there's always distractions.
Right. That's absolutely right. You have to have a plan B.
Okay, buddy, I'm going to put you in the green room if you want to stick around.
This time I will. I won't leave.
Yeah, careful those buttons you're pushing in, because it'll take you to your destination.
Yeah, I'll do that.
There's your website right there. Cool. Okay, thanks again. We appreciate you, guy.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there you go. And that's how you get a hold of him. It's Gane. That's his last name, Gane, Gane, wisdom.com. And you can find his chrysalis book on there, but I will put some in the links and stuff too, so you can find the book about setting those goals and those objectives. So that's all I've got for you here at Synergy Cafe. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be good, be kind, be nice. And did I say be nice? I did. Be nice. Peace.